Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for Vision Technology's presentation on returning to work safely and securely in the new normal. We're going to talk today about a couple of different types of solutions. The first being touchless video conferencing and collaboration, or TVCC. We just briefly wanted to mention that most people, when they come into a conferencing situation, in a conference room, they're used to using a touch controller to control who is presenting, the content that's being presented on the screen. And we do have a number of solutions for people now to transfer that control directly to their mobile device, iPad, or laptop without having to interact with any touch controllers in the room. We also have the ability to add occupancy levels and social distancing tracking for existing camera equipment, for instance, through the lens of a VTC camera or a webcam. So we can incorporate your compliance policies and then generate an audio reminder or even a pop-up video reminder on the screen to please comply with policies. For instance, if people exceed the rated occupancy of the room during your current COVID restrictions. And those levels can be easily modified as you move, say, from 25% occupancy to 50% and so on. We have a number of different solutions to allow you to communicate and collaborate safely in the current environment. The other area we would like to talk about today is screening, protection, and tracing, or SPT. This incorporates a number of different technologies, from touchless access control systems to elevated skin temperature, or EST, screening and mask detection and screening, enforcing social distancing policies, and contact tracing. So why do we consider SPT? Well, there are a number of guidelines out there, state guidelines, local guidelines, as well as CDC recommendations that companies are facing. And of course, we all want to protect our employees and our visitors and their families and the community. One of the things that we've noticed is that when we began in our office trying to deal with the COVID restrictions, that we started off restricting the number of people coming into the office. And then at some point, we had to shift to how do I attract employees back into the work environment? And how do I assure them that it's safe to come back and that they feel like they're not endangering themselves or their family by showing up to work? So whether it's compliance or whether it's your duty to your employees, your staff, your visitors, most people are going to have policies in place. And once you implement a policy, it's also, you have a duty then to enforce that policy. So how do you show that you're enforcing that policy around masks, around occupancy, or social distancing? So one of the first ways would be through access control. Now, access control systems, many people have in place already, and they can be leveraged for this application. The key adjective, though, is touchless. We see a real trend to people not wanting to interact, for instance, with handicap buttons, push to exit buttons, or in some cases, biometric readers where they're required to put their finger or their hand, some part of their body, against a surface that other people are going to touch. So we have a number of solutions for that, including, for instance, for authentication, going to facial recognition or palm wave recognition instead of a fingerprint or a full hand contact type of reader. We also are incorporating skin temperature screening and mask screening into the same units that are doing the biometric authentication. So whether you want a standalone temperature sensor screening device or you want it integrated to your existing access control system, we do have technologies like you see on the screen that enable you to do that. Elevated skin temperature is a popular method of compliance for people today. We see a number of different form factors. For instance, the tablet, which can be mounted on the wall, can be mounted on a pedestal, or cameras, maybe on a tripod. We've seen those also on mobile carts with a laptop or even a tablet, which allows you to interact with the software, ask screening questions, those types of things. Also, at the same time, detect if a mask is being worn. We can actually lock down doors and not allow entry, or we can provide other non-physical type of barriers that would alert you if somebody attempts to enter, if they have failed a screening or have tried to avoid the screening process. So based on what technology you have in your building or on your campus, we can integrate these technologies into your existing solutions. And I'm going to turn this over now to David Ellis, who is the Regional Sales Manager for Genetec, to talk to you further about some of the technology.
Thank you, Rick. So at Genetec, what we are doing as a software company is trying to bring all of these different types of technologies that Rick has been describing together into a single interface. The goal with that is to basically, in today's environment, is to track those individuals at risk, to ensure occupancy limits, to provide a safe access to buildings and areas, and reduce unnecessary contact. All of those are things that are ultimate goals, especially via policies for our end users. But realistically, the challenge is bringing all of these different type of technologies together that allow you to achieve your goals. And so by bringing it together, we are enabling an easier method of managing policies, procedures, but also what we call event to actions. So in other words, when something is detected, what do you want to happen next? How do you want it to be notified? And that's generally what we're doing at that point. And we're going to explore a couple of different technologies. We can easily track people who may have been in close contact with contaminated individual. That was especially when COVID started up, one of the first and foremost things that our customers were requesting. So tracking proximity using access control data is really one of the things that evolved early, because one of the challenges that our end users were discovering was that, say John Smith arrived at work, and then John found out later in the day he was diagnosed with COVID. The question that then came out is, who's John been around from a contact tracing aspect? What users were struggling with was, how many people went and touched the same doorknob as John Smith at that point. So what we developed was a tool, a reporting tool within the system to allow you to identify the staff, the visitors, and the customers who may have been in close contact with that infected individual. And by doing that, what you're essentially doing is running a report that says, hey, John Smith, I want to know everybody that went through every door that John Smith went through, say, over the last 12 hours. And that way, at that point, the user then is able to extrapolate the data and then be able to determine, again, where John has been at. Another method that's pretty popular or gaining popularity is maybe using facial recognition when you're looking for where has John Smith been within the building and who may have been in the same areas with John. So again, tracking proximity and using access control data in this particular example is really a huge time saver in that case. Another very popular method that's really bubbled up since COVID started up is, how can we manage occupancy rates? The good news there is that managing occupancy rates actually has been around for quite a while. And a lot of that has been done through the retail markets where they're looking at their foot traffic. So being an adopter of these types of technologies is not anything that is necessarily new as much as just it's a new application for technology that's already been in place. Some things that you always want to think about, though, with occupancy management for social distancing is, what technology am I going to use? But more importantly, what's my policies? What is my policy going to be for when a room or a campus or a area gets too many heads, too many people? And what's going to be the event to action? So one of the first things that we look at from a technology aspect is people counting. So people counting, again, in the retail space has been around for quite a while. But looking at it as a whole, the technology really involves usually two types of technology. It's either counting heads via video analytics, or it's counting heads via type of technology called LiDAR, which might be similar to radar if you're familiar with radar. But what happens at that point, the people are counted, and then the analytics will analyze and basically count those heads, whether they've come into the space or out of the space. Then the crucial thing from there is, what is the event to action? Meaning that if I'm about to, if I've got too many people in the room, who do you want to notify and how do you want to notify? First and foremost, we see a trend in local notification to that room as being the first way of notifying. And we're seeing that either visually through, could be a strobe, it could be on a monitor with a target number that might be even have thresholds. So you might have in a green status, anything below the number of 100 might be in a green status. Anything, say, from 100 to 111 might be a yellow, a warning. And anything above, say, 111 might be a red. And then that may even still give a local audio notification that says we need to reduce the head count in this room. Could be even just a buzzer, a siren or something, again, to grab the attention of that room that, hey, we've got too many people in the room. But the next piece of the puzzle really is, what do you want to do with the data after the fact or even during the fact? You've maybe even alerted a central station or a central operations center that, hey, I've got too many people in this room or this building or on the campus. And that's the thing. How do you want to get that notification at the macro level? Do you want that notification to come via email? Do you want to come mobile? Do you want it to come to an operations center that maybe flashes a big warning sign up on a screen? All of this really comes back to managing occupancy policies. And what I always suggest with our users is go back and let's look at the policies or your SOPs. And some of these SOPs are brand new or just now in development for a lot of the end users. But take the SOPs and then back the technology into the SOP so that you can then effectively come to the table knowing what you want that event to action be. Again, very popular. But I'll tell you, the next technology that's really doing this is probably one of the ones that are really the next step or next generation of tracking. So HID Location Services developed a product called Blue Vision. Blue Vision is really going to a whole new level rather than just counting a head that comes through a door. What you've got in this particular case is basically tags or pendants or ways of things that people might carry, very similar to an access control card, that then through a series of antennas that are within your building, campus, or area, that will be able to track that person or that access and actually help you identify exactly where they are within the premise. So the benefit to that is you can instantly trigger and send alert and notifications when a person enters an area and how many are in a space. It also helps workforce identify available rooms and see who's left in the building and their location. Those last two bullets really are some of the most important, because oftentimes right now, a lot of end users are asking, okay, what do I do with this technology after I've invested in it? And this is one of the ones that has multiple uses way after COVID. And that, again, helping identify when rooms are available, that is something that comes up often, especially in large corporate environments where they're trying to see if meeting rooms are occupied, where they're trying to see what the head count is in this cafeteria versus this cafeteria. That comes up often. But in an egress scenario or an emergency evacuation scenario, you may want to see who's left in a building and where they're at in that location as part of that mustering report. Then at that point, that allows the investigators or the people in management to be able to go and explore to see if there is a person down or if they didn't get the notification, and help better account for those people, or and in some cases, even assets. Managing access during confinement and deconfinement. So this is probably the number one request that's popping up the most now in return to work. And the big challenge here is, again, with a lot of companies or a lot of end users, is do I want my entire workforce all in the building simultaneously? Or do I want to split them up into groups, an A group and a B group? Do I want to allow visitors in the space or in the building? And if I do, how am I going to notify them of compliance issues or requirements? How am I going to allow them to garner access to the area? The bigger challenge for all of this, though, is the traditional methods of visitor management and access control have been usually through a badging office or a badging group or a single person maybe in security that approves visitors, because the limitations of access control were just not meant for any real nimble approaches. The way we're approaching it at Genetec is through our product called Clear ID. And what Clear ID is really looking at is it's an overlay or an overlay of the Genetec access control system that is utilizing workflows. And what those workflows are really based upon are, instead of just the individual, which is typical of access control, it's the individual, their attributes. It could be their roles within the company. But more importantly, that bottleneck has been a consistent challenge for most end users. What the end users are now able to do is divvy up or divide up the approvals at different managers' levels within the ecosystem of the company. Meaning that I could have instead of having all requests for visitors just get bottlenecked at the security office, I can now distribute that amongst department heads, for example, that may have an approval process to allow them via workflow to approve that visitor to come to the site, or those employees to return based on certain roles. So an example of that would be an employee, how to enforce a back to work plan. So if I'm the department manager, I'm pretty much ready to slowly transition my team back to the office. The problem I've got there is I may be in a scenario where I have team members that I might need to come in multiple types of groups, but I still need to, maybe the CEO is determined or the CEO is determined that there needs to only be a 50% occupancy. What I'm able through a product like Clear ID to do is basically request that office access for my team. And what I would do in that scenario is maybe come up with a team A and a team B scenario. But what happens through workflows is I'm saying that I want team A to have access on Mondays and Tuesdays and team B on Wednesdays and Thursdays. What happens there, once I've made that request, it goes to the area owner, and then the area owner at that point will go and either approve that request or deny that request. Instead of, again, it probably in the old way being an email that goes to the security person that says, here's a list of people I need to be A and B, and you need to go set that up. Instead, through this world, what I'm able to do as the department manager or as a security manager is put the onus back on the department manager to bucket those teams, and then back to the next area owner or the next level of approval to go and approve or deny it. And as long as the area owner has the approvals within the system to approve it, then it'll go through and again, avoid that bottleneck and distribute that approval process throughout the ecosystem. But then the same thing, is really taken into consideration with visitors, because the visitors not only need to be able to have a safe experience, but they also need to have a level of compliance as well. So here's the employee again. He needs to meet with the vendor at the office. So what he does is he creates a meeting in Clear ID, and within that access request, he's going to go and say who, where, when, and why they're coming. And then once it goes from that person, it may go to that area supervisor to go and really say, does that person need to be here? Does that person really need to come on premise, or can this be done via webinar? Again, the request not having to go through the security office to the bottleneck, but it's instead going to the area supervisor to really deem if it's really a necessary meeting. The area supervisor approves or denies it. And with the assumption that it's approved, it'll then send an email notification to the visitor with a QR code that allows them maybe to self-check in and get a badge when they arrive, and then a notification back to the employee that that person has arrived. The other thing that's very popular within this is once that approval goes down and that QR code is sent, it may also be a requirement or a policy of the company that, let's say in today's world, here are my COVID policies and procedures. You need to acknowledge that and maybe print it out and bring it with you as a signed acknowledgement. Again, within this, it's really taking visitor management to a whole new level. But again, being tied into the access control system allows, even in that case, for maybe it's a one-day badge that needs to be issued at the front desk for that person. That would already be ready to go via the approval process. You could also use that same QR code in theory to even unlock a gate or a door. So again, lots of options there. All right, with that, I'll turn it back over to Rick to close.
All right, thank you, David. And thank you all for attending today. And I'm sure that you have questions or maybe ideas of how this might be integrated that you'd like to discuss with us. My contact number is here on the screen. I'll be happy to take your calls or your emails and give you more information. Thank you.